You can be fit, have a great VO2 max, and still have belly fat. And if that's you, sure, the training is there and so is your effort. But the reason your waist hasn't moved is because you're measuring the wrong thing. VO2 max tells you how well your heart performs. It tells you nothing about what's stored around your organs. And this video is about the metric that actually matters and why fixing it is simpler than you think. My name's Adam, I'm a performance nutritionist. I've helped over 300 men lose their belly fat over the last 10 years. So VO2 max is actually the maximum amount of oxygen your body can use during intense exercise. It's expressed in milliliters per kilogram of body weight per minute. The higher, the better. It tracks closely with your cardiovascular health, and it's a legit predictor of how long you'll live. The problem is the last part, because once longevity gets attached to something, people on the internet turn it into the whole entire game. And VO2 max has become one of those metrics, the one certain podcasters treat like it unlocks immortality. But here's what the research actually shows. High cardiorespiratory fitness and low belly fat are correlated. Population level data do show that fitter people tend to carry less visceral fat. But correlation at the population level doesn't mean causation at the individual level. And it doesn't mean your VO2 max score is proof that belly fat isn't your problem. There's also something structurally broken about how VO2 max is calculated, and that's why I went a bit technical. It's a relative measure, milliliters of oxygen per kilogram of body weight. So a lighter, leaner person mathematically scores higher, not necessarily because their cardio is markedly better, but partly because there's less of them. Part of what the number is measuring is already your leanness. So using VO2 max as evidence that your body composition is fine is circular. You're using a metric that partly reflects your body weight to argue your body weight is fine. Okay, so it might be a bit rare, but there's a phenotype in the research that gets discussed less than it probably should. Scientists call it TOFI, thin outside, fat inside. It describes people who appear lean and sometimes they're even athletic, but they're carrying a significant amount of fat around their organs. Professor Jimmy Bell at Imperial College London imaged two men with identical BMIs. They had the same external appearance, but one of them had nearly 4 times the internal fat as the other. Remember, they had the same number on the scale, but 4 times the amount of visceral fat. Now extend that to men who are fit by VO2 standards. One particular study tracked close to 1,000 adults and found that once you accounted for how much visceral fat someone was carrying, their cardiorespiratory fitness score had no independent effects on their diabetes risk. And the visceral fat was doing the damage regardless of how good their aerobic numbers looked. This is a thing that men over 30 consistently miss. They get a decent VO2 max on their Garmin or some other device, and they can run a 5K at a more than reasonable time. And they interpret that as evidence that their health is in order. But if their waist is 40 inches, their height is, say, 5'10", their waist to height ratio is pushing 0.57. And now you have a problem that your VO2 max isn't completely detecting. Now you may have gathered from that, my favorite measure is the waist to height ratio. It's super simple, takes 30 seconds, and a large meta-analysis of over 300,000 adults across multiple ethnic groups found it outperforms BMI and waist circumference alone. This is when it comes to predicting cardiovascular disease, type 2 diabetes, and all-cause mortality. Now you have a much simpler target. Your waist should be around, well, less than half your height. So if you're 5'10", 70 inches, your waist should be under 35 inches. If you're 6 foot, under 36. That's it. Now measure it first thing in the morning, stand relaxed, the tape just above your navel, and you can take it 3 times and average it for better accuracy. And if you've done a different condition in the past, you can just make that your standard and continue to do that. The most important thing is the consistency of the measure. And then obviously you can account for the absolute change over time. And what makes this metric actually useful, not just in theory, it measures the fat that's causing a problem, the visceral fat, the stuff packed around your liver, your pancreas, your intestines, and not just the stuff you can pinch, but the fat you can't see and feel. Because that's the fat that's actually secreting inflammatory compounds and disrupting your metabolic function. And then if we look at a separate analysis, this found that after adjusting for all other cardiovascular risk factors, weight to height ratio was the only metric that held as an independent predictor of future heart disease. Not your VO2 max, BMI, or even cholesterol, your waist to height ratio. Now, this is a question I get asked in some form almost from every man that comes to me having done everything right except their diet, or they say they struggle with nutrition. The honest answer is yes. Having good cardiovascular fitness does help, but it doesn't cancel the risk. And the research on fit but fat is genuinely interesting and generally contested at the same time. When I looked at a 2025 meta-analysis pooling nearly 400,000 observations, and before you say, oh yeah, it's observational data, to get 400,000 people, it has to be observations. You can't control 400,000 people. That showed that regardless of their weight, there showed no statistical significant increase in cardiovascular disease or all-cause mortality compared to lean and fit people. So of course, fitness is protective. But here's what the same research also found. Unfit people, regardless of their weight, showed 2 to 3 times the mortality risk of fit people. And the metabolic protection from fitness was strongest in people who were also addressing their body composition. So being fit does buy you some insurance, but it doesn't make you immune. And there's a more uncomfortable finding underneath all of this. Roughly half of the people classified as metabolically healthy obese, fit with no obvious risk factors, go on to develop metabolic problems over the number of years. So no matter what, the excess visceral fat does catch up to you, doesn't just stay quiet forever. So of course, keep training, especially if you love cardio. Yes, keep doing it, and cardio does matter. But don't let a decent fitness score become the reason to stop taking your waistline seriously. And this is where me being direct will save you even more time, because there's a version of this online which is vague and confusing, and this is on purpose. Your belly fat is there just because of your energy balance. Well, primarily, and your ability to maintain that. Full stop. The primary driver of total fat accumulation and fat loss is how much you're eating relative to how much you're burning. You can easily overeat any amount of exercise. So your diet is the dominant variable here. But here's something the research shows that most people don't know. Visceral fat, specifically the fat around your organs, is usually the first to go. It's responsive to exercise, and not in a way that can replace diet by any means, or one that can cancel out your poor choices, but in a way that works alongside one. So there's a situation where both work together. A 2023 meta-analysis found that exercise shows a clear dose-response effect on visceral fat. More structured exercise, and particularly aerobic work, seems to remove visceral fat, and does so in the absence sometimes of weight loss on a scale. The diet-only group in this study, the dose response doesn't show up as strong. And you'll probably be like, oh, of course, because of, you're doing both things. You're burning more calories and you're eating less. And of course, diet does shrink total fat. Exercise can help aid this by potentially mobilizing more visceral fat through a process driven by adrenaline. Your liver fat and organ fat get pulled first before the stuff you can actually pinch, the subcutaneous fat. And that's usually why you see a waist measurement go down, not necessarily the amount of belly fat you can pinch, but you see a waist measurement go down first when you start exercising, even before the scale moves much. And you have to remember this, aerobic exercise alone without a calorie deficit produces modest total weight loss. We're talking about over a longer period. On average, exercise-only programs produce somewhere between 3 to 8 pounds of weight loss. It's not enough to really make a dent in like a serious amount of belly fat. You need the deficit, but the exercise amplifies what the deficit starts. Now, part of the problem is how VO2 max is communicated. It's a real useful metric. High cardiorespiratory fitness is generally one of the strongest predictors of all-cause mortality in the literature. Each meaningful increase in fitness is associated with maybe a 10 to 15% reduction in mortality risk. And of course, yes, that's meaningful. But that finding gets extracted from context and turned into a fitness personality. Men build their entire training identity around chasing a higher VO2 max number, doing hours of zone 2 work a week, and treating cardio as the thing that's going to solve their health. But at the same time, their nutrition hasn't changed, their waist hasn't moved, and they wonder why they don't look or feel any different. And the evidence on this is clear. Cardio is beneficial. I'm not arguing against that. Aerobic training improves nearly every marker of health. But there's a sharp difference between training for health or training for a performance score. And most men over 30 with belly fat to lose should not be optimizing for a performance score just yet. The other thing worth saying is the VO2 max on your watch is probably, well, most definitely not accurate. Wearable VO2 estimates are based on heart rate algorithms, on averages, and not actual oxygen measurement. If you want a real number, you need to go to a lab and test with a mask. But most people won't do that, and that's completely fine. But this number that a lot of people are chasing is not even real. It's not even accurate. Okay, so this sometimes ruffles a few feathers, especially people who are obsessed with VO2 max. If you lift consistently and you walk a lot, we're talking like, imagine you're lifting at least 3 times a week and you're walking 7 to 12,000 steps a day, your VO2 max will be decent enough to matter for your health outcomes. And that's why the outcome data does show that when you combine strength training with walking, like I said, in those doses, 3 times a week strength training and walking 7 to 12,000 steps a day, you're going to improve all markers of health. You're probably going to get like 99.9% of the health benefits you're going to get from exercise, or at least 95%. So it's not a compromised position, and it's not me coping. That's what the outcome data shows. Too many people forget that I used to be obsessed with cardio. I did MMA for 10 years. I wanted to be a professional MMA fighter. I owned a HIIT studio. I only changed my approach based on the research and also the response. You know, people have a finite amount of time, and focusing on the things that move the needle the most is important. The other stuff is just a bonus. You can't do everything at once. Resistance training doesn't massively increase VO2 max in already fit men, but it does something far more important for body composition even. It preserves muscle in a calorie deficit. Muscle is the thing you usually lose during a fat loss phase, and it doesn't come back as easily. And people may argue, especially after 30, when you've got less time. Losing muscle while in a calorie deficit is a bad trade, which leaves you lighter and not necessarily leaner, just more fragile. And if that's not bad enough, when you get to your goal weight, you become worse at maintaining it. Hunger is through the roof. You're less satisfied with the way you look. Psychologically, it doesn't feel great. I've done it before. And walking is underestimated because it doesn't feel like exercise, But the data on non-exercise activity, so NEAT, shows that the calories you burn through just moving throughout the day show up, like, can vary between like 2,000 per day with people that have similar body sizes. And that difference isn't happening in the gym, it's happening in the 23 hours outside it. Well, you're asleep for at least 7 or even at least 6. And look, you see a lot of clickbait content. 10,000 steps isn't magic, but getting 7 or 8,000 consistently does 3 things simultaneously. It increases your daily energy expenditure, it suppresses your appetite compared to being fully sedentary, and it contributes to, yes, aerobic conditioning in a way that's sustainable for decades. So you see the results over time without taxing your recovery. You don't need to run, but you do need to move as much as you can. And now here's what everything looks like in practice. First, measure the right thing. Get a tape measure. Then first thing tomorrow morning, measure your waist just above the navel, standing relaxed, and do it 3 times if you want better accuracy, then average it. Divide that number by your height in the same units. If that number is above 0.5, that's your primary target. Forget about your VO2 max score, for now at least. Then second, fix your diet. Set a deficit of around 15 to 25% depending on how much fat you actually have to lose. And you can play around with my fat loss calculator below. It's completely free. And get your protein to around 1 gram per pound of your goal body weight. Now what you eat, whether you do keto or not, is secondary, but the deficit and the protein are the non-negotiables. Third, I want you to lift at least 3 to 5 times a week. You're not trying to sweat or get out of breath, but you're at least trying to maintain the muscle you do have. And fourth is walking 7 to 12 or more if you can, but I'd say 7 to 12,000 steps a day as your baseline. Now, this is your primary NEAT lever and doesn't require recovery. Fifth is, if you're doing all those things and you want the cherry on the icing, add 150 minutes of moderate cardio like per week. That could be just 3 sessions broken up, or it could be 2 to 3 sessions of HIIT. This is specifically to help speed things up a bit and obviously improve your cardiorespiratory fitness. Cycling, the elliptical, and rowing will interfere the least with your strength training if that's a concern. Now, check your waist every 2 weeks. If it's not moving, the deficit isn't real, which means you're usually underestimating your intake, not that the approach is wrong. Go over that and make sure you're not cheating yourself out of results. Remember, a high VO2 max is a sign of a healthy heart, but it's not a sign of a lean body. Those things are different, and confusing them is costing you progress. And if you enjoyed this video, subscribe, watch this one next. I'll see you there.